It's the Cavaliers Basketball Club Podcast.
It's basketball time at the Cube.
It's over! It's over! The 52-year drought is over! The Cavaliers have won the NBA championship! Cleveland, this is for you!
Mitchell goes to the basket and buries Cornette. Garland high steps over the timeline, stumps on a dime, hits the three. Garland has been unreal here in the fourth quarter. Shot clock down to 5. Lillard blocked by Mobley. Oh, my! Take his home. Challenge Allen, and Allen said no. Get that big stuff out of here. The shoot-around.
Welcome back to the club. The Cavs have continued some of their up-and-down play, winning an impressive 122-99 against the Clippers, a heartbreaker of a loss to the Heat at home, 100-97, and then a brawl-inducing stomp down of the Grizzlies, 128-113. Of course, it resulted in Mitchell's first ejection as a Cavalier. I'm happy that they got the win in Indiana, but I'm still thinking about that unnecessary play in the Memphis game. How about you, Colin?
I agree with you, Adam. The scuffle between Brooks and Mitchell is a big deal, and we will get into that later in the episode. But I was really impressed with how this team responded after Mitchell left. And then tonight against the Pacers on the road, they had an awesome win. They locked down each team and looked to have a flow to their offense, which resulted in them getting their first consecutive set of wins in more than a month.
Please be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or follow us on the podcast player of your choice. We are also adding extra content to our YouTube channel, so please subscribe. And be sure to leave a comment. We'd love for you to engage with the pod.
All right, Adam. Kyrie Irving has reportedly been traded to the Dallas Mavericks. This was after it broke last week that he requested a trade. I think I summed it best up to you when I texted you a string of laughter, just ha-ha-has repeatedly for, I think, 17 lines. Did you find this situation as funny as I did?
No, it was hilarious. Obviously, today when I saw the news, I texted you the link that I found, and I laughed as well. I sent the laugh chain right back in your direction because it was even funnier to me that he was traded for nothing. You know, no offense, because there are players involved and they're human beings. Mm-hmm. But I just mean, in the grand scheme of things, Kyrie Irving is one of the top 5 point guards in the league when it comes to his skill. And the Nets just had to give him away. And, you know, I'll mention it now and you can take it a little further. But how's that James Harden trade looking for you? You know, like just the fact that they got rid of Allen to have this result in the end, I really feel for that organization and for Kevin Durant because at the end of the day, you know, I don't want to punch people when they're down. So
yeah,
it's really a shame.
Well, it's really nice of you to not punch anyone when they're down. I was actually thinking about how earlier in the season, you and I had talked about the standings or potential standings for how this team, the Nets could shake out and where the Cavs would fit. And I remember mentioning that Kyrie could just lose sight of the goal of winning games and being a contributor off of, you know, some article he would read about how he would only walk to work because he was becoming so environmentally conscious, so he would miss every game in practice going forward. Instead, he just requested a trade and again bailed on a team that is right now, the Nets are a top 4, top 3 team given the night in the Eastern Conference, and he just said, "Nah, I'm done. I'm tired of playing and having success." Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you're staring at a team that is just above us in the standings and one of their main guys is requesting a trade out of town, I looked at the headlines going, what happened? What changed over the last week or two? Nothing. Just Kyrie went, no. I've decided that my word is crap. I don't need to stay here, and I'm more important than the game. I'm more important than this franchise. You know? And the Nets, I think they did the right thing by just jettisoning him and getting what they could out of it. But his value has decreased so significantly because of his behavior that, I mean, Kyrie Irving was just gotten for a huge steal. And the Mavericks have to hope that he wants to prove something in the time that he's there. Otherwise, it's just going to be another pit stop for this guy of, oh, is he even playing? Donovan Mitchell was targeted by Dillon Brooks in the Grizzlies game last Thursday, rolling into Mitchell's leg and punching at his groin. Donovan retaliated by throwing the ball at Brooks, then pushing him. He got ejected and later fined $20,000 for his response. Thoughts?
All of it was completely warranted. Any athlete, any human would have responded in that manner. In a lot of ways, worse. You and I have seen players on the court in the NBA punch other dudes in the face and completely give them bloody lips or noses for altercations or dirty plays that are much more warranted than even in this instance. So I thought that Brooks got away light. He ended up getting suspended a game, so he'll lose about $75K for not playing. But Donovan Mitchell is a top 5 player right now in the league, top 10 player in the league right now, especially in the Eastern Conference. And Brooks was able to get him ejected out of a game by assaulting him and having a dirty play. And that's exactly what the Grizzlies didn't probably call for Brooks to do, but that's what they wanted out of that situation. They got their best player, the Cavs' best player, off the floor. And the Cavs luckily responded by beating the tar out of them for the rest of the game. But it's kind of iffy. The Cavs, as we've mentioned throughout the season, have been a little iffy in these last 10 or 15 games during that stretch. So who knows how they would have responded. So my initial thoughts are that Mitchell was completely in the right frame of mind. His reaction was completely warranted. And Brooks was really lucky that they don't have an actual bruiser type of player on the Cavaliers roster.
Yeah, we talked about it after it happened, and as you know, I didn't see it in real time. I saw it afterwards. I don't know if I would have had a different reaction if I had seen it as it happened, rather, because I came in knowing that it happened, so I was kind of prepared for it. It wasn't as severe as I kind of expected it to be. His response, I should say, for him being ejected over it. I understand that the NBA has a zero tolerance policy for those things, and if you throw the ball or swing at someone or anything like that, or make contact in the way that he pushed him, basically you're going to get tossed. But I think that it's an overreaction that probably came from the malice in the palace. I mean, possibly something that has been now almost 20 years on.
Yeah.
Where the NBA kind of over-corrected, and now there's no fighting, there's no altercations allowed within the NBA. Whereas like a sport like hockey, you're allowed to punch a guy and it's part of the sport. That's an extreme. I just kind of wonder if they need to go back to some things being allowed when the play. So I guess I was thinking more about this where Garland almost lost his eye this year. And we've seen other times in other eras of the Cavs where Kevin Love with his arm being pulled out with Kelly Olynyk. That the Cavaliers seem to be targeted by teams in the NBA physically, and the refs aren't doing anything about it.
Yeah,
there's no consequence for the other side, and our consequence is pretty dire. So I don't blame Mitchell being a little keyed up, considering that they've been taking cheap shots all year long, and now he has a groin injury that everybody in the league knows about, and this guy swings at his injury. So I think that's Bush League, and I think Mitchell should have. It should have been understandable that he, like maybe give him a timeout or something. I don't know. It's fine to say, hey, this guy has to go off the court and sit down for the rest of the quarter or something like that. But an ejection in that situation, you should be allowed to defend yourself.
Yeah.
And that's really all he was doing. And he was sending a message to the rest of the league of, no, you're not allowed to do that to me.
Yeah.
And it's no different than the teammates around you, coming to your aid. We've talked about that over the years that, if somebody comes at you and your teammates are not there to protect you, that's a bad sign. It means that nobody on the team supports you, right?
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
So again, these things actually have a place within the game, and they're there whether you want them to be or not. And right now, they're kind of forcing them out of the game, and that's not really working.
Yeah, I think that there's something to it where the refs, for sure, on the floor need to be a little more cognizant. In other leagues, like even in lower tier leagues in soccer, they have a fourth ref who is just watching the game. They're not on the pitch, they're not on the field trying to dictate what is happening. They're there to be that extra set of eyes. And clearly the NBA needs to invest even more money into an idea like that, where they would have noticed Brooks' kind of chippy play. They would have noticed there was some stuff going on beforehand and tried to alert the refs on the floor, because they were slow on the uptake there, because Brooks is known for this type of play in general. And the way that whole situation broke down, where he misses the layup because he's not that athletic of a player compared to other NBA players, but then he clearly looks back over his shoulder to see where Mitchell is standing. There has to be a fourth ref or some other type of ref to see this is about to go down right now. And they were slow on the uptick, like you said. And I think that the NBA needs to do a little bit of a better job of what you're getting at, which is they're not really giving a good rhyme or reason for some of these fines or some of these, type of, for them being disciplinarians, they're not giving the best reasoning as to why they're disciplining these players for incidents.
Yeah, they're acting as if, grown men, they're not allowed to respond in kind, have a moment on the court to hash out these situations and say, okay, I'm gonna stop this behavior right here, right now. Yeah. And that was just something that, to me, it just goes, there's a lot of problems with the officiating and how they manage the game. Something I've said for a long time is that, when they allow these harder fouls to happen early on in the game, there's no line that they know, oh, I can't cross this. And so before you know it, somebody gets really hurt. And the refs have a responsibility to maintain that understanding throughout the game, and also to police their tempers and to let them be human, So he's our guy, and we're gonna defend him. But I felt his response was justified and not that over the top to me.
This week, the Cavs play 5 games in 7 days, truly their most difficult stretch of play for the team. What are you looking out for in these games, and is there a player that you are going to particularly pay attention to?
Well, out of these stretch of games, I would say, first of all, I would hope that we're going to come away with 5 wins. Now, I know that in a short stretch, we probably won't. It's because it's 5 games in 7 nights. Yeah, that's probably not going to happen. But looking at the fact that it's the Wizards, Pistons, Pelicans, Bulls, and Spurs, you got a chance here. All of these teams are having a difficult time this year, and except, and the Spurs obviously already had an interesting win against us this year. But I think just strength of schedule and the fact, things that we've pointed out over the last few weeks that we should be defending better, that statistically it's just not showing up because even though we're putting hands in faces, guys are knocking shots down. So if that's going to get better, if our effort remains but people stop getting lucky against us, our defense should see an uptick, and we should see less nights of us losing to subpar teams or teams that are at the bottom of the standings. So even though it's 5 games and 7 nights, I'm seeing this team start to stretch its legs and prepare itself for the end of the year. So with the right chips falling and certain players being able to manage their minutes, JB being able to sub guys in and out and keeping guys fresh in that time, if you can get some role playing support from guys like Jetty and Okoro, then you've got a shot. You got a shot. Let's say 4 out of 5. I'm going to hope that they can win 4. Now, the one player that I'll point out and then hand you the baton here, the player that I'll point out that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is Isaac Okoro. And that's because since the start of the year, he's shooting almost 50% from 3. After tonight, he probably is almost there. I believe he was 3 of 3 tonight, or close to it.
3 of 4, I think. Yeah,
3 of 4 against the Pacers here. So he's turning it on. His defense has been gradually picking back up to the level that we expect of him, and his shot is starting to look comfortable, and that's really all we need from him. So if he can contribute the way that he's been, I think we have a really good shot to win the next 4 out of 5. How about you?
Well, the fact that they started off with a win with the Pacers is a good step, and they should get at least 3 more wins on top of that in this stretch of games because of what you pointed out. A lot of these teams are not up to snuff. They're not as good as the Cavs. I love your choice of Isaac. Isaac is a great selection. He had a 3 tonight where Mitchell passed him the ball on the wing, and it wasn't even in his shooter's pocket, and he was able to knock it down, which is his confidence. You can just, I live all the way in Pennsylvania, and I can see it, from Indiana, from Indiana to PA. So it is great to see. The player or players that you kind of hinted at that I'm looking at is the bench play, because the bench play has been just a crapshoot for this team in a bit. And some players that aren't playing right now are Kevin Love and Karis LeVert. They have not played the last 2 games, and that's intriguing to me. And a player that is on the bench that has looked outstanding is Ricky Rubio. Rubio is not going to be playing back-to-back, so he's not going to play in a couple of these games during the stretch. But Rubio looked fantastic against the Grizzlies in the 4th quarter, just hitting shots and distributing. And again tonight against the Pacers had over 9 assists, or at least 9 assists. So that's your point guard coming off the bench with Mitchell and Garland in front of him. That's just fantastic play. And I'm really curious to see how the veterans on the bench are distributed during the stretch of games, because if LeVert and Love are going to keep sitting more, that's to me a little bit of an indicator of how the rest of this season will go, because JB is clearly trusting how Rubio is infusing an offensive flow. You and I have talked about this. He just looks so comfortable on the floor. Their offense isn't some type of crazy system that's, 7 pyramids on top of each other, but Rubio knows how to initiate and get in and out of picks and screens and really allow this team to sing on that side of the ball. So Rubio is probably the guy I'm looking at the most.
Yeah, Rubio's exciting, especially tonight's 9 assists, as you pointed out. That's stellar. On a team that really needs to find its offensive production outside of Mitchell. Most likely, you know, a Rubio-led offense off the bench just means that you're actually getting production from guys while Mitchell is getting rest, most likely. And I know they're going to be out there playing together from time to time, but Karis LeVert and Love and some of these guys sitting out, my mind keeps wandering off to trades. Anybody going to be gone soon? Now, I don't think Love will be a part of that because I think people understand he's a hometown guy at this point. People want him to stay, and he's in the last year of his contract. We can get him for a steal next year if we want him, probably. But Karis LeVert has been in a lot of trade conversations. So it doesn't feel like, if they do make a move, it doesn't feel like he's going to be here much longer.
The final seconds.
The reserve players were finalized for the All-Star game. Are you surprised that Garland nor Allen were selected to fill out the roster?
I'm not the biggest fan of the All-Star game, the All-Star break, when it came to Cleveland last year. I didn't care. I did not go. I didn't even try to go. I rarely make a point to watch it. I've hardly ever remembered to vote for it, for the players in it. It's tough for me to care about this. From a fan's perspective, it doesn't matter. From a player's perspective, I think these guys care a lot. And Allen is having a little bit less of a stellar year than last year. When you look at his stats and even just the eye test, it's not been quite the same this season. So I understand why he could get bumped out. It's unfortunate, but I think he's a reserve and or a starter is in the All-Star games for the rest of his career. It could be that way or it could be not. It just depends on how he's being used on the team that he's on. He's got the skills to be an all-star. It's just, how is he being used this season? Well, with Mitchell, I think he's got a little bit lost in the shuffle. Garland's stats are all up, and he's played a pretty consistent role on this team of getting us wins when Mitchell's not out there. And even though I can be down on him at times, I think simply because I see a lot of potential in him. He is an all-star. He absolutely is. And he at least deserves to be on the reserves. So even though this doesn't really matter to me, I can understand why it's a slight for a player of his skill set. And I hope that he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder about it. I don't get the sense that Garland does that necessarily. Maybe he does, and he's just a little more humble about being left out on those things. But I hope it just motivates him to prove people wrong, or at least that they should have considered him either as a reserve or as a starter for the season. So hopefully it'll be motivation going into the postseason and into next year. It's trade rumor time again. Marc Stein reports that the Cavs are among the teams expressing strong trade interest in Portland Trailblazer Josh Hart. Would you take him? What players do you think we'd have to give up to get him?
So I like Josh Hart. I think that Josh Hart is a good player and he can contribute off the bench for a lot of teams. But at the same time, I think we already have a better version of him already, and he's younger, and that's Isaac Okoro. Okoro has a higher upside than Josh Hart. He's probably a better defender even right now. And the way that Okoro has been shooting, as you mentioned earlier in the episode, from behind the arc since the beginning of the year of 2023, he's a better shooter than Josh Hart. And I think the only reason we would go after Hart is if JB really wanted to double down on the defensive side, the defensive mentality, where if he started to suddenly trust that Jetty has really hit a groove with this roster and Jetty is this offensive talent that we know defensively is a little weaker, then maybe you would have Josh Hart pair with him to give Isaac some rest. But it's just a little tough for me to see them getting him and keeping Isaac. So unfortunately, that's kind of where I hedge is really you would probably give up Okoro because they're kind of the same type of player, but I don't want to get rid of Isaac, so it's not a trade I would make. The only other guy that I'm really willing to give up is Karis LeVert, and even though I like Josh Hart probably a little bit more as a player, Karis can still get you a bucket, and Josh Hart really doesn't do that. So the team would just really need to figure out what their mentality would be in pursuing a trade like this. The last point I would make is it's cool that, you know, trade season is always kind of interesting because you're adding new pieces and whatnot, and you want your team to always improve. But I think everyone can really agree with the Cavs is they're a young team. They're still trying to figure everything out. If anything, they need better consistent shooting from the outside off their bench. But their bench has also been a little injury prone this season. So they could stay with what they have or pursue a shooter, which I would be fine with. But they really should make sure that they do not give up too much just for this one season. Their future is super bright, and they need to make sure that they don't do anything to damage or hamper that future.
Thank you for listening to the Cavaliers Basketball Club podcast. Let's go Cavs!